Hey, hello everyone. Welcome back to Nader's Nemesis 2.0. This is the fourth video and covers the activities that I've had on the car for December and January. With the holidays occurring in those 2 months, I decided to push this video out one extra month and do it here in the beginning of February. In the last video, I covered several things, one being the narrowing of the suspension assemblies to allow it to fit within the shell of the Corvair, and the initial construction of the framing jig that I built that I will use to begin to assemble the different parts of the frame members and tie them into the suspension assemblies. The focus over the last couple of months was on finishing the suspension assemblies, including what to do with the rack. I also spent a lot of time cleaning out and removing various components of the Corvair to open it up and get it ready for this new chassis. I spent a lot of time also in the last couple of months mapping out how I'm going to position this chassis and framing members inside the shell of the Corvair, and how I'm going to lower it onto it and fasten it in, and make sure that it's has the right dimensions and everything fits inside. So let me show you each of these components that I worked on over the last month. So this is the rear suspension assembly, and what I wanted to point out to you is that I've put the stock Corvette shock absorbers in and spaced them out to the distance that the new coilover shocks that I'll be putting on here will be set up as. That's all designed to give me the ride height that I'll have with this assembly when it's all put together. So as it sits on the jig right now, that ride height will allow me then to get the framing members all put together and held in a spot where the ride height throughout the chassis will be correct. So I've got them done in the back, and what I use is spacers to get the correct ride height, and in the front I used a rod that's got a steel tube, and then I've got threaded rods screwed into it, so I can actually adjust by just screwing the nuts on this threaded rod to get the right height. So I've got both of those set up to do that, and it's worked out pretty well. So now these, as they sit here, are balanced and level and at the proper ride height. The next thing I wanted to show you is something that I ended the last video on, was the rack and pinion. I was hoping to be able to use the stock Corvette rack that came with it, and had it fastened in with some brackets. And a couple of followers had pointed out that the length of that rack, given the fact that I've narrowed the suspension unit, was going to create a bump steer problem, and they were exactly right. That was a good point they were making. So as I started to check it out, I found that that pivot point for that rack was extended beyond 3 inches out on each side. So I ended up having to acquire a flaming river rack, which the pivot points for the arms, the steering arms in this, is right in line with the connection points for the upper and lower control arms for the suspension. So now as that moves up and down and the arm is fastened in, there's no bump steer issue now. So I had to modify the bracket to hold that rack and pinion rack, I should say, steering rack on, and we should be good to go. I'll have some work to do to get the steering linkage hooked in, but That's for a little later on as I start to put things together. Where I spent most of my time over the last couple of months was with the Corvair itself. Last video, the Corvair was basically all assembled and had every component in there. So I have spent the last couple of months taking everything apart. I've removed bumpers, all the lights, grills, fittings, hoods, windshield, rear window, steering column, the trunk area, headlights, everything that was in this car has basically been removed. I left the dash in and the headliners in because I really don't plan on affecting that in this. The dash I'll have some work to do, but that's for a little later on, and it's not going to be in the way of the things I have to do for the next few steps. So I've got everything cleared out of this car. The engine's out, the drivetrain, including the transmission and differential, have been removed. I've got the framing cut off. I'll have a little more cleanup to do, and I'll do that when I start to think about how I'll connect the chassis into that framing member in both the front and in the back up, or in the back and in the front up here. I am going to be attaching the frame rails into the rocker panels, and so I've made some cuts to be able to get those things to fit in, and I'll weld those into the rocker panels on the inside. I've also had to do some adjustments with some of the components in the car. Given the width of the rear tires, I've had to relocate some of the pieces in the back here, namely the hinges for the engine cover. I had to move those inboard 2 inches and get them set up so that they'll continue to bolt to the engine cover hood. I'm planning to use this air intake area, which for the original car, the Corvair, was the source of incoming air to cool that air-cooled engine. So I'm going to continue to use this, but it'll have a different purpose, one for air intake for the engine, and others to allow the engine area in the car to exhaust hot air out, so it's not creating a higher temperature inside the car. So more to come on that, but I have some more work to do to clean things up back here, but I'm not going to do that until I get the frame in here and tie this section together. I really don't want to put any more pressure on the quarter panels as they stand right now. They're not supported real well right now, so I'm going to get the framing in to support that out. Up front, I'm going to see if I can keep these in place and use them. I like the form of this, and it'll be nice if I can utilize that. I've got a little rust that I'm going to need to take care of here. It's about the only place in this car that's got some rust, and frankly, for a 55-year-old car which spent all of its life in Ohio and Indiana, where winters had a lot of salt on the roads, it's not too bad a shape from a rust standpoint. So I'm pleased with that, but I will have a few pieces, few places where I'll have to do some metal replacement to clean up some rust and weld in some new fresh metal. But not bad. Lots of area in here. It's pretty wide open, but it'll fill up fast as we start to put things together. The other area that I spent some time on this month, not a lot of time, but I've got engine mounts on this LS7 and got those installed. And since I will be picking up fresh air for this engine from that rear grille area behind the window, back window, I needed to reverse the throttle body and intake manifold. And on an LS engine, it's not too hard of a job to do. It's symmetrical in terms of bolts, However, there is one area that needs to be addressed, and that is in the back of these engines on the valley cover, and I'm not sure you can see that, but there is a boss here that had a oil sending unit screwed in, and that oil sending unit, when screwed into that boss, would not allow the manifold to bolt down. So I've relocated that sending unit down here to the oil, right above the oil filter. Got an adapter that allows that to be screwed in there, and then I have plugged and machined that off to create enough clearance for that manifold to be switched around. So that now is ready to go. I've taken the exhaust manifolds off because they'll kind of get in the way when I'm putting that in and out of the chassis, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to use what manifolds were on there, so I'll probably have to get some block hugger manifolds to make that work in this chassis. But we're starting to do a little bit with that, and I really do like this engine. It's the heads on it are really nice. They're CNC ported, and pretty excited to see how that's going to work in this car. So that's it for work we did on the engine this last couple months. That's all for this update. I would like to thank everyone who's been providing some comments and suggestions. I appreciate that, and I try to respond to them when I get a chance. But thanks for following, and look forward to the next video in about a month. My focus is going to be on getting the chassis build out over this next month. So I've gotten a start on that with frame rails across the rear suspension, and I'll be working at trying to get the rest of that built out. It's be a slow go because there'll be a lot of measuring and making sure it ties together with the drivetrain and fitting into the Corvair shell. But this is the part that I'm pretty excited about, because I'll start to see some progress being made on things getting put together rather than me taking everything apart. So again, thanks for watching and following, and we'll talk to you in about a month.